The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Geneva, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast with limited commercials. Now, here's host, Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable. 10 o'clock Saturdays right here, and all the old shows, like I like to say, are on nononsenseroundtable.com. So if this show is about people you know and you want to know more about, and people you don't know that you should know, I have somebody here who you should know for a number of different reasons. I'm sure a lot of you have never met this woman before, but I mean, this show is going to be like it's going to operate on a number of different levels because there's a lot of different facets to Carol. And at that, I'm going to introduce you to Caroll Crossed, who has I have to tell you, this is going to be like a variety show of like good stuff and learning about different things, because Carol is an author. She wrote this book. It's more like a coffee table book, Vintage Tweets. She is the president of the Susan B. Anthony Birthplace Museum, which is not here. This is in Massachusetts, right?
Adams, Massachusetts.
She is involved with Feminists Choosing Life, which is a very interesting organization. You founded Democrats for Life in New York State,
is that? In New York State, that's right.
Yeah, and a mom of 6?
That's right.
And how many grandchildren?
17.
There you go. There is enough stuff there to talk about. But welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dom.
Well, we met at the Chatterbox. There was a presentation by Dr. D.J. Robinson, and it was a magnificent presentation. I think she did a great job of explaining her community and the challenges that her community has faced. And we were sitting across the table from one another, and we started talking about different things. And in here someplace, we have to get your story about you went to school, and a certain individual, famous individual, was the caretaker at the high school, right?
That's right. It was actually a college in Louisville, Kentucky, Dom, and it was Nazareth College at the time. It's now called Spalding College. This was in 1961 and 62.
Okay, so we're going to save that story we're going to save that particular story for later, because that's going to be the punchline of the whole of the whole show. It's going to surprise people about who this person is. So I'm just going to tease the audience for a while. But the first thing, let's talk about the Susan B. Anthony thing, because that's fascinating. I think a lot of people have in our audience, know kind of about Susan B. Anthony. But one of the things that surprised me is that you said the museum is the Birthplace, and the Birthplace is in Massachusetts. And tell me about that whole thing. Tell me about the museum, and tell me about Susan B. Anthony. What were the relevant points of that we don't know about Susan B. Anthony?
Sure. Well, the Birthplace, people are curious as to how I can own the Birthplace. This happened 18 years ago when the Birthplace came up for auction. The place where she was born was on a little rural road in a very small town in the Berkshires. And it was pretty much falling apart. Came up for auction. When I saw what the house looked like, I realized that it was very similar to my own house. It's a Quaker Federal. I restored my own house, and I knew how to restore her home. It was built in 1818. Susan was born there in 1820. And I love Susan B. Anthony. I find that she certainly, nationally and internationally, she's known as a human rights leader. And she would always correct people if they said, you're for women's rights. She would say, no, I'm for human rights. And so I love who she is. I love what she did. And so, yeah, we opened it as a museum in 2010. And so that's a very exciting visitor center there now. So we're very thrilled with that.
So talk to me about Susan B. Anthony. What precipitated this in her? Was it something she saw? Was her parents? Was inequity?
Sure.
What was the genesis of
her
work?
Yeah, she was a Quaker. And her father was a Quaker, and her mother was a Baptist, and they adapted the Quaker lifestyle, of course. Her father's sister was a preacher, and unlike other religions at the time, the Quakers did allow women to preach. So she had her Aunt Hannah Hoxie as a role model. So being a Quaker, she was a pacifist, which means that she opposed all violence to human life. She opposed war. She was not even enthusiastic about the Civil War, despite the fact that she was an abolitionist. She opposed capital punishment. She opposed abortion. So she was someone that I really found was an enigma today, because oftentimes we don't put all of those issues together under pacifism and nonviolence. So she was a role model to me. She was not a mother. She chose the lifestyle of an activist, and she didn't feel that she could do the work that needed to be done in our country, and at the same time to be a mom. And she had expressed that opinion to some of the other suffragist leaders that she worked with.
So did she have siblings?
She had siblings. She was the second oldest in her family. As a matter of fact, her youngest sibling, Merritt Anthony, was a member of John Brown's army.
Really?
And this was had to be not very well accepted among her parents. We wonder what her parents thought of that, don't we? So he was not part of the Harper's Ferry incident. But yeah, he was part of that army, very, very much a part of that violent solution that the Civil War represented.
Well, that Harper's Ferry thing. I mean, the fascinating thing is that he thought he was going to precipitate a whole movement, and it didn't happen, but it happened eventually. So. The question that I have, though, is that when did she actually start this, if you call it rabble rousing? I mean, at what age was she starting to make her voice known?
Well, she was a teacher.
Okay.
And as a teacher, she saw the evils of liquor consumption amongst her children. And so that led her into the temperance movement. And she found out that when she went to these meetings, she couldn't speak because she was a woman. So that opened a whole new door for her.
So the problem with the alcohol consumption was what started her on a path of voice, and she knew she couldn't get anything done unless women had a vote, because they weren't being heard, and that started the whole thing.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. I did not know that. And back then, I guess pretty much women, you could be a seamstress or a teacher. Probably is about it, right? Well,
there were certainly many limited opportunities. So she, but the women felt very strongly that the domestic sphere needed the vote, not just the social sphere. But there were things that were happening to children. They needed taxes from the liquor industry to support the education system. They understood health concerns of children that needed to be part of the vote.
Well, it's fascinating. So I've learned, in the first section, I've learned stuff already, and we'll see everybody right after this. This is Dom from my friends at Jack Greco Furniture. You drive your car, you live with your furniture. That's why Nita and I buy our furniture locally from Jack Greco. Hey, lots of old name furniture manufacturers switch to mass production, producing their furniture who knows where. Why settle for that? Jack has quality pieces made by true craftsmen, and if you need a custom piece, Jack can do that for you too. The season's upon us. Jack has quality outdoor furniture you won't find anywhere else. Go to jackgreco.com. This is Dom for my friend Jim Shelley and his Fanatics Pub and Blue Stage in Lyman, New York. Like I say, a short scoot down 390 to exit 10, make a left at the light. A couple of miles down the road, there's Fanatics Pub and Blue Stage. You can see their nightly shows by going to fanaticspub.com, but this time of the year, his patio is open for free entertainment 3 to 6 on weekends. Go! It's a great place. Well, welcome back. We're talking to Caroll Crossed, who was just talking to us about Susan B. Anthony and the tremendous effect that she's had on people's lives, not only as a suffragist, but also a human rights advocate. But I promised everybody that Carol has a very interesting story, which she told me at lunch a little while ago. And I was like, oh, wow, you got to repeat that on the air. So I'm going to let you loose with this story about some very famous person. And if anybody can guess who this is, you're not going to be able to guess who this is. But go ahead, tell the story.
Thank you. Yes, I was in class at Nazareth College in Louisville, Kentucky. So this was in 1961, 62, 63. And outside of our history class, without fail, would be the janitor. And I'd like to think that he had a crush on me, but I'm not sure that's true. But his name was Cassius Clay, and some of you may know him as Muhammad Ali. And my friends and I would come out, and he would always be waiting because he wanted to know what we got on our history exam. And if we did well, we would always dance with him in the hall with the broom. And I remember those days so fondly.
So, I was talking on the show about regular guy. It sounds like he was a regular guy, right?
Oh, he's totally regular. Totally regular.
So it wasn't that much later that he was professionally fighting. I mean, he probably was training when he was doing that, but
yeah, I think he fought Sonny Liston maybe in 1962, but he may have gotten that was in perhaps 62. And his Olympic gold medal, I believe, was maybe before that.
Yeah.
Maybe in 61.
Yeah.
But I remember him displaying his Olympic gold medal. And of course, we didn't even know he was a boxer. We had no idea. Nobody knew. That's cool.
And talk about somebody who has had an effect on American culture. That's really cool. So let's go on to another topic. You have this book. It's called Vintage Tweets. So talk about it. It's more like it's like a coffee table book, I would say.
Right. So everybody has a weird obsession or hobby. Mine was collecting old postcards. I started doing this for a gift for my husband because he renovates old buildings, creates affordable housing oftentimes. And I would buy postcards of these old buildings. So I collected suffrage postcards, and these are over 100 years of age. And when I put the book together, Dom, it wasn't necessary to research the producer or the illustrator of the card because they were in the public domain. Mm-hmm. Made writing the book a lot easier when you use things that are 100 years of age. Mm-hmm. So I have about 650 suffrage postcards, and they're in 11 different themes throughout the book. The Smithsonian Museum did a story on the book, and I learned so much about postcard history through that experience. But there are postcards that are made of leather. They were popular 1902 to 1909 when the cancellation machines were upgraded and could no longer cancel leather postcards. Lots of very fun things that are said on the reverse sides of the cards. Children and animals were very popular use. Because the message of suffrage was, a hard one to hear. So they wanted to soften it with nurturing images. And there are some violent images in the book. There's a section on that. There's also, the book ends with photography because that became more popular toward the end of the suffrage era in 1920 when suffrage passed.
It is a beautifully illustrated book. I mean, obviously there are full color pictures of these postcards, but I mean the title is brilliant, Vintage Tweets, because I mean for time immemorial people have been saying things in just short sentences or one-liners or something like that, and that's what this is. This is just a precursor to basically TikTok, I would think, right? I mean,
well, you have to remember that the telephone was not a popular household item in this period of time, if it was invented at all. So that what people would say on a postcard is what we would pick up the phone and say, thank you for the soup. Mother's better. I can't come to the meeting Tuesday night. So they were very colloquial, conversational kinds of things.
Do you have favorites in this that you can, off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, one, of course, there is a illustrator series, and one of them are Dunstan Weiler series. Another one is Walter Wellman illustrator series. Walter Wellman's cards are all in these beautiful soft pinks and purples, and he predicts that there's going to be frilly senatoresses and judgmental judgettes if we have suffrage they're just all very comical.
Oh, the horrors of having women in these positions.
Exactly.
Oh my Lord! But have any of these like horrified you? I mean, have you seen any of these that you look at and you go, "Oh my God"?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the ones produced in 1917, right before the U.S. started World War I.
Yeah.
These were produced in Germany, and they really are quite violent. Women are shown to be, testosterone, whiskered-faced women, and they are vises are put on their mouths. And my guess is that these were produced for and distributed by possibly the beer unions, because people, the men, the saloon owners knew that if women got the vote
right,
there would be no more liquor industry. And so they were aggressively fighting suffrage. And once Prohibition was passed around 1919, they just kind of threw up their hands and said, well, we may as well allow suffrage. And that really did propel the suffrage movement.
That's interesting. I personally think, I don't know anything about this, the liquor movement or whatever back then, but I think a lot of people were self-medicating back then. You didn't have the drugs that you have now, and so like I said, I don't know anything about anything, but I think a lot of people got drunk because that's the way of dealing with pain, and so of course it was a social thing too, because guys would get paid and they would go to the local bar, when they got their paycheck, and they'd go home and they wouldn't have any money to pay to feed the kids, so. But
well, the liquor content was higher then than it is now.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I think women back then, they wanted to bring men out of the bars and back home into the family. They wanted to keep men off the battlefield. So as Elizabeth Cady Stanton said, that she believed that because of motherhood, women were superior to men. Yeah, she said that. So there was a part of what they wanted to do was to create less aggressive men in a more peaceful world.
Unintended consequences sometimes too. Prohibition, right?
Good point.
It's the worst law of all. I always say the law of unintended consequences. Well, we are heading into another break, and then we're going to, come back, and we're going to talk to you after the break. And now, here's co-founder of the Rascals, inductee of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Rochester guy, Gene Cornish, to say a word about his favorite team.
The Red Wings rock. I've been a fan since I was a kid in my bedroom hearing the cheers from Silver Stadium. Memories I will never forget. Here's what's happening this week.
The Red Wings are home this weekend. Friday is Women in Sports Night, featuring a Naomi Silver bobblehead and fireworks. Saturday is a Cocos Locos Night, with a pint glass giveaway and fireworks. Sunday, kids can run the bases. For tickets, visit redwingsbaseball.com.
Well, welcome back. We're talking to Caroll Crossed, and the number of things in her life. And one of the things we mentioned at the beginning of the show was that she is a member of the Feminists Choosing Life organization and Democrats for Life, which I'm familiar with the Democrats for Life because my son-in-law is involved with that. But the Feminists Choosing Life, and life goes beyond just the abortion issue. You were saying.
Sure. I oftentimes wonder what the suffragists would believe, if they would connect with us in Feminists Choosing Life of New York. We span the spectrum of political parties. I myself am a Democrat. I think they would probably welcome and embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, actually. Because certainly diversity with all of these issues, Feminists Choosing Life considers ourselves consistent life ethic. In other words, we oppose violence across the board as a solution to solving problems, whether it's war, capital punishment, abortion, euthanasia. And so it's the opposite of diversity. Abortion is the opposite of diversity because we're aborting the poor, are we not? We're aborting women in some of these countries in Asia and India. We're aborting the disabled. We have countries like Denmark and Iceland that are proud of the fact that they no longer have Down syndrome children. And so I do believe that the diversity, equity, and inclusion, equity, of course, because we were all allowed to be born. So that is an equitable solution. So I think that we're very active in New York State, and we have a tremendous executive director, a diverse board, and regional directors throughout the state.
I was unaware that such an organization existed. Well, how do people get in touch with the organization? Is it a website or? Yeah,
sure. It's www.feministchoosing.life.com. .org, excuse me.
FeministChoosingLife.org. Well, it's such a polarizing issue because, on one side of the spectrum, you have people saying that abortion should be totally unrestricted, and I mean, in a very sensitive sort of way. I mean, up until what point? I mean, obviously, I mean, on the if somebody's in labor, I mean, you're not going to agree that you can have an abortion then. That humanity would compel that not happen. And on the other side, you have people that say that anything having to do with birth control is immoral, which is completely the other side. And the people on each side are arguing with each other and making trouble for each other. But there's some place in between where the discussion needs to happen. Someplace in between where the discussion needs to happen, where we're not being pulled by either really extreme side, and that's as far as I'm going to go editorializing with the whole issue. But I think to increase people's knowledge about what your organization does and stands for, I think it's a good idea to at least investigate it.
Sure, I do think that it's interesting that the early women leaders, the suffragists, opposed abortion because, they didn't have an ultrasound. They couldn't see the unborn human being. But they believe so strongly in maternal education about embryology. And as a matter of fact, Susan B. Anthony's newspaper hosted lectures by an embryologist, Anna Dinsmore French. They also, they were shamed for single motherhood. They didn't have employment opportunities to raise a single child. Rape laws were hardly, certainly not enforced, but hardly in existence. And so there were so many reasons why they should have been for abortion. So I'm not sure where to go with that, except I think that they understood their pacifism kicked in and said that we needed to protect life, whether it was in war, whether it was in abortion. Jane Addams herself, founder of Hull House and the first woman who was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, was against capital punishment. And so I think that we can learn from our early suffragist leaders. We have a T-shirt in the gift shop at the Birthplace Museum that says, "History should make you feel uncomfortable."
Well, we were talking before the show, though, how far we've come. I mean, we have to go a long way too, but we are of the age that I remember employment ads in the paper, help wanted male and help wanted female. I mean, I mean, it seems like that would have been hundreds of years ago. No, you're talking about the 50s and 60s. Help wanted male and help wanted female.
That's right.
I remember Andy Griffith's episode where Ellie was going to be on the town board. Oh, Ellie's a woman.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, yeah, okay. You know, and we're looking back, and that wasn't that long ago.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's right. We have come a long way, for sure.
Well, and I think that if you look at the executives and the women in power in media and whatever, it has come a long way in the past 30 years. I mean, we were talking before the show too. There's a picture of me being at Chrysler, and there's 16 or 18 people that were trainees there. On the left-hand side, there's the one black guy, and then the right-hand side, there's the one woman, and the rest of us white guys, you know, sitting in this picture. And that was back in 1984, for God's sakes. That wasn't that long ago.
That's good. And of course, what our in-between solution was to put the woman in the center. and now there's more women to sprinkle throughout, as it should be.
So 6 children, right?
Exactly.
And how many grandchildren?
17.
God bless you.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. And what's the youngest of the grandchildren? What's the youngest and the oldest?
14 is the youngest of the grandchildren. The oldest is 31.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. You know,
Thank you.
And you take a look at, I have this expression, you look in the eyes of your children, your grandchildren, they're supposed to be here. If you did anything other than what you did, those children wouldn't be here. Yeah.
And I was mentioning to you, Dom, before our conversation on air about a book called Mom Genes. And it's written by a sociologist. But all the animal kingdom, when a woman becomes pregnant, she becomes more communitarian. She becomes less individualistic. And I think about that in my own life. And I feel that the concern that I have for the broader culture really has something to do with my concern as a mother, making the world a better place in the future for those children.
And let's talk a little bit before we go, the last minute here about the book again. The book is called Vintage Tweets. It's a beautiful book. I mean, it is something that you can thumb through and spend a little time here and there and look through all this stuff. Some of it's quite surprising about the way people used to think and deal with things. Especially, I love these that you look at now and you go, oh my God, what were they thinking back then? It
is colorful. It's colorful and not only to look at, but
in both sense of the words. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is.
Well, it's been delightful spending time with you, and I'm going to have you back, and I'm going to have to. We'll talk a little bit more about life and your kids and grandkids and whatever. But it's really neat to meet somebody who has so many different facets of their life as you have, Carol. And thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
This is Dom for my friend John McClurg at McClurg Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram and McClurg Chevrolet in Perry, New York. Hey, the buds are coming out on the trees. Everybody likes a nice ride. Take a ride down to McClurg in Perry and see the great deals that he has on Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram vehicles and Chevy trucks. I tell you, John McClurg does business the old-fashioned way. He takes care of you. No nonsense. And used cars? He's got great used cars. See him today or go to McClurg Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram or McClurg Chevrolet. This portion of the show is brought to you by Martinizing Dry Cleaners in Fairport. During COVID days, I discovered a dry cleaner that would pick up and deliver. I discovered Martinizing in Fairport. I later discovered that the owner, Todd, was an ex-corporate employee who went on to start his own business just like I did, and his customer service is beyond compare. Google rating 4.9 with 143 reviews. 4.9. Call 425-4242 or martinizing.com/Fairport. So, Carol, the question I like asking people is kind of a silly little question. What did you want to do or be when you were 10 years old?
I wanted to be a librarian because I love to read. It's kind of boring, isn't it?
No. Are you a voracious reader? I mean,
I am.
Nita always is. I mean, I interviewed Scott Petoniak, and he wrote 36 books. I told him I don't think I've read 36 books.
My goodness.
But tell me about your reading habits.
What I was mentioning to you earlier is that when my mom died, she on her deathbed, she said, "Carol, go over there in that desk drawer." She said, and I opened these drawers, and she had saved every letter that I ever wrote to her. And of course, I lived away from home almost certainly all my married life, and that's how we communicated, was through writing letters. I wrote to her probably every 3 weeks for over 40 years.
Wow.
And so she had over 300 letters, and I made them into a book. And I told my mother everything. It was easier, when you were writing a letter. I told her about the kids, the problems I had with the kids, arguments I might have with my husband, the different times that I was arrested for different kinds of civil disobedience, which I've been arrested 19 times.
Whoa. Well, what? Okay.
So I told it, I printed it all out because I wanted my kids to see the kinds of things the trials and tribulations that I went through and their father went through, some of their difficult times. And they appreciated seeing that in writing.
Okay, now that ladies and gentlemen, that noise you just heard was the elephant coming into the room. Let's talk about this this being arrested thing. This is something I didn't expect from this very petite, soft-spoken woman that's sitting across from me. So talk to me about this.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I had studied Gandhi and certainly studied Dr. Martin Luther King. I actually went to Howard University for one semester, and you wonder, why did I get into an all-black college? It's because I'm part Cherokee. So they did allow me to go to school there, and that was during the time when Dr. Martin Luther King was active in Washington, D.C. So I participated in some activism there. And I learned about nonviolence and the tactics of nonviolence. And so I did some training to different kinds of protesters, whether they were Central American human rights. I went to Central America for that. Anti-war was a big deal. Anti-abortion was a big deal. And so usually when I would train somebody, I would get arrested with them. Nonviolent activism is critical right now, and we're not doing it right. We're not doing it the way Dr. Martin Luther King would do it, or Aunt Gandhi would do it. That's a whole nother topic, but my family could tell you about the times I've been in jail, when Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be on the table and I wasn't there. There were some advantages because, you didn't have laundry to do. And so I've often thought about writing a book about famous jails I have known. I was let out of Washington, D.C. one time at 2:00 in the morning, which was their practice. It was something that I did for El Salvador Human Rights. And it's 2:00 in the morning in Washington, D.C. walking back to your hotel was not fun.
Oh, yeah.
But any rate, that's another book I should write.
But you have to be a tough-minded little thing. I mean, you're so. I wish everybody could say, what are you, like 5'2", and you weigh like what, 90 pounds, 5'2". I mean, and you're out there putting yourself on the line, getting arrested for these causes. But I heard a little bit of a lilt in your voice there about what's happening today with the campus protests, right? It sounds like this is like the antithesis to what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it is disturbing. I think that some people may see that some of those are peaceful in the sense that certainly people are not being destroyed and property might not be destroyed, but it's not nonviolence. Nonviolence is openness, it's candor. You would never wear a mask. Nonviolence is vulnerability. You allow yourself to be the victim. You express yourself like the victim. And so what I'm seeing on college campuses today, not to say that I don't disagree with their position, but I think their tactics are not considered nonviolence the way Dr. Martin Luther King or Gandhi would.
Well, ultimately, to get something done, you either need to get consensus or dominate. Okay, and I don't see where there's enough political will, domination-wise, that you're going to get there anywhere close to their demands met. I mean, if you're talking about you're expecting this, and this, or I'm not going to leave campus. Well, what you're demanding is just not going to happen. I mean, it's not going to happen. You're going to need to you need to get consensus for people, and that's sort of like our political system these days. You need consensus, and that's what we're not seeing.
Good point. Yeah, well, you have to change hearts, and that takes time.
Exactly, and yelling at people is a very poor way of getting people to your side.
Absolutely,
and that's and getting them to have empathy for the situation, educating people to what's going on or whatever is not taking over a building and graffiti and all this other stuff. I mean, that's all you're doing is making more enemies.
Yeah, those are good points. And I have seen some of the manuals that have been distributed on these college campuses, and they are disturbing, some of the tactics that are being used.
Okay, so was there a time then that you got to the point where no, I'm not going to be in a position to be arrested anymore, or have you been a grandmother and been have you settled down a tad, or?
Yeah, I haven't been arrested for about 20 years. So I love what Susan B. Anthony did. I love the fact that she was strong enough to do that. I could tell you some stories I heard in jail that were very interesting.
Oh my God, this is great. Oh my Lord, I'm so happy to have you on the show. This is just so good. Who knew? This is like peeling back an onion. I mean, the more I talk to you, the more levels I see of you. It's just delightful because I thought this when I met you, and there's nothing better than being right. I'm right so infrequently. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. Our time is up, but we'll be here next week, 10 to 11, right here on News Radio Wham 1180.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every Saturday from 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.